Rebecca Joynes was a high school math teacher from England who started receiving attention from her underage students, and instead of being the adult and shutting them down, she encouraged it. She took advantage of that attention and the students that she was meant to educate and protect in a horrible way. She was eventually caught and arrested, but was let out on bail with one condition: no communicating or interacting with any other underage person. Unfortunately, this was not enough to stop her, and while she was out on bail, she would do this all over again with another student. We'll talk about the way this unfolded and the aftermath that came from her actions. How did this escalate to the level it did? How did she go from being a trusted teacher to a convicted predator? And what happened to the lives affected and changed forever? Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing super well. Thank you so much for being here to listen to today's video. Today, we're going to be heading all the way to the UK to talk about a case where a 27-year-old teacher named Rebecca Joynes took advantage of her authority and was charged with multiple counts of essay against minors. This case is truly disturbing and so frustrating. This girl, she really makes me mad. Now, I want to reiterate that what we're going to be talking about today is for educational and awareness purposes only. This is a very important video because unfortunately, cases like this are becoming more and more common, and it's crucial to be aware of the dangers of grooming and sexual abuse and assault, especially when the perpetrator is someone in a position of trust, like in this case, a teacher. This video is part of my, female teachers crime series, where I highlight and bring awareness to the other side of teacher-student crimes that we often don't hear about. These are cases where female teachers take advantage of their position and commit crimes against their students. I know this case will be heard by someone who will think, oh, well, good for that boy, or wow, where were these attractive teachers like that when I was in school, or oh, that boy's gonna be fine, he's probably a legend among his friends, and other ridiculous comments like that, but that is not the case whatsoever. Just because the victim is a teenage boy does not mean that he is not a victim. I want to reiterate this and just make it very clear that no matter the gender or how willing both parties were, a minor cannot give real consent. To the parents, caretakers, and guardians watching, I know this is an incredibly tough topic. It's easy to think, oh, that could never happen to my child. But unfortunately, the reality is that it can and it could. However, staying informed and having these conversations about this is one of the best ways to protect our loved ones. A special thank you to my familia members who are watching this early before it goes live, and a quick thank you to today's sponsor, Pair Eyewear, for supporting this channel. Thank you to Pair Eyewear for sponsoring this video. Fall is officially here, and this is my favorite time of the year. Cozy nights in, pumpkin patches, Halloween parties, crisp morning walks. This is just the best time of the year, and there are just so many cute ways to spice up your wardrobe this cozy season. Pair Eyewear is the easiest way to switch up your vibe without changing your entire outfit. The base frames start at just $60, and then you can snap on these magnetic top frames starting at $25 to transform your look in literally a second. I'm wearing the pumpkin garden top frame for the Larkin base frame. I wore them to the post office the other day and I got so many compliments on them. I love the little pumpkins, and this frame just feels very vintagey, like Halloween vintage, which is the vibe I'm going for this Halloween season. And I love how easy it is to just snap on the top frames. If I want to wear a more classic fall outfit, I can just take off my pumpkin top frame. I can just snap on my Charlie Brown plaid top frame, and it's giving Cher, right? And the website makes it so easy. You can actually virtually try on every style before you order. Plus, they've got blue light lenses, sun tops, and even light responsive lenses if you're bouncing between fall movie marathons and pumpkin patch day trips. There's prescription and non-prescription options. There's just truly an option for everyone. And I love that they're more affordable than traditional glasses, but still high quality, super comfy, and honestly just fun. One pair, infinite possibilities. So if you want to upgrade your fall fits or your spooky season looks, click the link in the description box down below or scan the QR code here to get 15% off your first pair. Trust me, you'll never look at glasses the same way again. Once again, thank you so much to Pair Eyewear for supporting this channel. And with that, let's jump into the video. I will be leaving some resources down below, specifically for parents, guardians, and caretakers on how to talk to your children and your teens about grooming, how to spot the early warning signs, how to report suspicious behavior, and how to set strong and protective boundaries. I'll also be sharing resources for if you or someone you know has been a victim of sexual abuse to help and support. Rebecca Joynes was born on December 30th, 1993, just one day before New Year's Eve to her parents Stuart and Mel. She grew up in Northwest England alongside alongside her younger sister Isabel. Growing up, Rebecca excelled in gymnastics, cheer, dancing, and was described as being an introvert. Acquaintances said that she would mostly keep to herself, but that overall, she was a nice person. It is reported that Rebecca struggled with eating disorders and that she was bullied at school, but we don't know the exact details of why. When the time came to think about her future, Rebecca chose to study sports and exercise science at Liverpool John Moores University. She also went on to study teaching children from underprivileged backgrounds and completed a 2-year Teach First qualification program. She then furthered her education by earning a postgraduate degree in secondary mathematics at Edge Hill University. So, she seemed quite busy with her studies. In 2018, she landed a stable full-time job as a math teacher at a school in Manchester, so now she was even busier. But, her busy schedule took her mind off things. There was a lot going on in Rebecca's personal life. She had just ended a 9-year relationship with her boyfriend, so keeping busy was helping her move forward. So a little bit about this relationship. She and her boyfriend had been together since she was 15 years old, so they were high school sweethearts, and they honestly seemed very in love. Rebecca truly thought that this was her person, that they were going to get married and just have this amazing future together, but people around them said that this relationship was pretty rocky. Rebecca was quite paranoid. She was always suspecting that her boyfriend was cheating on her, and people described her as just being jealous and possessive in the relationship. She always wanted to know where her boyfriend was and who he was with and what he was doing, and ultimately that pushed her boyfriend away and led to the breakup. This breakup, like most breakups, was very difficult for Rebecca. It left her feeling lonely, isolated, and very depressed. But she stayed focused on her job and said that she saw a bright future ahead of her. At her job, she taught students between the ages of 11 and 18, and she started to notice how some of the older students started to take note of her look. They gave her the nickname Bunda Becky, which apparently is in reference to her big butt, as they would say. Obviously, this is a very inappropriate comment to make and a very inappropriate nickname to, give your teacher. But, it became part of the chatter in the halls and among the students. According to court documents, Rebecca let this influence her, and she started to turn to her male students and the attention that they were giving her to meet her own emotional needs. Like I said, she was feeling lonely. She was feeling upset about life. So now that these teens were giving her attention and saying that she had a big butt and that she was like the hot teacher, she started to turn to that attention to kind of fulfill herself and make herself feel better about where her life was. During one of her math classes in October of 2021, one of her underage students, whom we'll call boy number 1 because in the court documents, these victims are not named. So boy number 1 asked for Rebecca's phone number. He had been a little bit more open on his, crush on Rebecca, making comments like Bunda Becky or things along those lines to make it known what he thought of her. So when he asked for her phone number, instead of ignoring this request or telling him that it was an inappropriate request and just shutting this down as any adult and teacher should, Rebecca engaged with this. She even made it like a little game, like a challenge for him. She gave boy number 1 the first digits of her phone number and left him to guess the final one as a challenge, almost teasing him instead of just saying, "No, I'm not giving you my phone number. I'm your teacher. You're my student. This is inappropriate." So she sets up this game for him, and boy number 1 quickly guessed the remaining digit, and now that he had her full phone number, he called her right then and there in the middle of class. Rebecca could hear her phone ringing from her purse and seemed shocked that he actually guessed her phone number, but she ignored the call since she was in the middle of teaching. Boy number 1 then texted her saying, "Are you going to ignore me then? I see how it is." This is when the flirty text messages began and were exchanged over the next few days between Rebecca and boy number 1. The boy would text her saying that he didn't like math anymore because he was too distracted by the work, and Rebecca replied saying, "Better be the work." He then replied saying, "Of course it is, miss. What else would it be?" And then she replied saying, "Good." Now, at first, this might seem like innocent in a way. I mean, it's not innocent because why is she texting her student? But people have interpreted these text messages as the boy implying that he's distracted by Rebecca during math class because he has a crush on her and because they're in this flirty situation, not by the work itself. So the two were texting each other these very disturbing messages, and then eventually the messaging moved on to Snapchat, where they were set to vanish mode, and these messages would disappear after 24 hours. The messages were not sexual per se, but they were very suggestive and flirty, none of which should have been and should ever be happening between an adult and a minor, let alone a teacher and a student. Shortly after talking back and forth in this manner, Rebecca crossed yet another line. She was done talking behind a screen, and she was going to take this in person outside of the school. She messaged boy number 1 and arranged to meet with him after school one Friday night. Now, these hangout plans came as a result of one of his replies to her Snapchat story. She had posted a photo of her hanging out at the mall, and boy number one replied to the story saying, "When are you taking me?" So Rebecca told boy number one that after school on that Friday, she would take him to the mall, and that afterwards he could go to her apartment. According to him, he said he told her, quote, "Well, I may as well stay." And Rebecca said that that was okay with her, that they could totally have a sleepover after going to the mall and hanging out. Again, this is a teacher planning a sleepover with a student. It's just insane and disturbing. So come that Friday, boy number one got home from school. He changed out of his uniform, packed his overnight bag, and told his mom that he was going to go to a sleepover at his friend's house. When in reality, as we know, that was a lie because he was not going to a friend's house. He was instead going to sleep over at his teacher's apartment. Rebecca later picked him up a few streets away from his house to avoid being seen, and with that, their afternoon hangout / sleepover began. They first did a quick errand. They went to go pick up her dog and then dropped her dog off at her parents' house for the night. She even asked the boy to lay back in the car so that her parents didn't see him, and she even parked her car a few, blocks away just to ensure that her parents would absolutely not see that there was a teenage boy inside her car. I don't understand why she didn't go do this before meeting up with the boy. That's just crazy that she felt brave enough to go to her parents' house with this kid in her car. After this, they made their way to the mall, and on the drive, boy number one would later say that Rebecca made a comment about driving, to which he replied saying, "Oh, I wouldn't know because I'm not old enough," which prompted Rebecca to chuckle and reply saying, "Oh, shut up," kind of downplaying his age because this is crazy. He's not even old enough to drive, yet this girl is taking him to go shopping and to have a sleepover. So once they get to this very public mall, which is still shocking that she took him to such a public space where anybody from the community could have seen them, they start walking around the mall. And Rebecca eventually takes him into a store and buys him a Gucci belt priced at 345 pounds, which is around $460. This entire transaction and interaction was caught on surveillance footage, and in it, Rebecca has a smirk on her face as she leans against the counter watching this boy pick at the items and pick his favorite belt. It is the weirdest video I've ever seen. Honestly, she just looks so happy and excited at the fact that she's buying him this belt, and she feels so powerful right now, So she buys her 15-year-old student, whom she's been exchanging very suggestive and inappropriate text messages, an almost $500 Gucci belt. Why? Well, this was a clear way of grooming the student, which we'll later hear about from the judge in this case. After this very expensive shopping trip, boy number one and Rebecca are seen on surveillance footage heading to her apartment complex. There, he remembers walking up the stairs to her apartment and thinking that this was all a bit weird. They entered the apartment, he sat on her couch and asked her what she wanted to do. She returned the question back to him, and he replied saying, "I think you know what I want to do," which made her laugh. They sat on her couch and started talking about more intimate things such as, "How many people have you slept with?" To which she replied, "Probably not as many as you." Which, what? You're saying this to a 15-year-old? Shortly after, they kissed, and she then would sexually assault him twice, which again, to reiterate, it was sexual assault. A minor cannot legally give consent, regardless of how willing they appear or who initiates the interaction. At that age, they're still developing cognitively and emotionally and aren't fully equipped to understand the consequences of that kind of dynamic, especially with an adult in a position of authority. So again, I just want to make that very clear. Boy number one later confessed to not ejaculating during the first assault due to all of this feeling extremely weird. It was after they showered that they had sex again, aka Rebecca assaulted him again, where he finally ejaculated, and they did not use a condom during this assault. Now, his semen would later be found on her bed sheets, and this will come into play later. So, the morning after this incident, Rebecca wakes up early, she leaves her apartment to go do some shopping, and she leaves boy number one behind in her apartment with her apartment key and with a key fob to enter the apartment complex, which is quite odd because he wouldn't need either of those things to leave or to lock up her apartment, since Rebecca usually left her apartment door unlocked. So was this left for him to return and come and go as he pleased? Was she basically giving him a key to her apartment so that he could come whenever he wanted to? It was very odd, but either way, the boy ended up leaving and going back home. When he was back home with his mom noticed something on his neck. It was a hickey, so she began questioning why her 15-year-old son had a hickey if he had gone to spend the night with his friends. The boy kept telling his mom that he was just with his friends, that nothing had happened, and then he messaged Rebecca that his mom was pretty much onto him and that she was, questioning him about where he actually was the night before. Rebecca responded saying that she better not find out, and although he was able to keep up the cover to his mom, he did eventually tell some of his friends what happened. And well, they're like high school boys, so of course rumors are going going to spread. Of course, gossip is going to spread. So this rumor began spreading like wildfire among the students, and ultimately, the school got word of the entire situation. On the following Monday, boy number one's mother was called into the school to inform her of the situation. Rebecca heard of this and she started to get paranoid. She was scared of getting caught and being confronted any second by the school or by police officers, so she asked another student of hers for help and for advice. This was another underage boy who was also a classmate and a friend of boy number one, whom we'll just call boy number two. So she reaches out to boy number two for help. He ends up helping her reset her phone to its factory resettings, so there was no proof of anything there. However, getting rid of that evidence wasn't enough because boy number one had already confessed to what happened. Rebecca was then arrested and suspended from the school, but she was later let out on bail while police and internal school investigations into the allegations continued.
Hello, you okay?
Hi, we're looking for Rebecca.
Yeah, it's me.
Yeah, we're going to come in for a second.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not sure how much you know what's going on, but my colleague's just got something that she needs to see.
Yeah.
So obviously, given what's happened, I know you've been sent home from school today. So you are under arrest at the moment on suspicion of sexual activity with a child. You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention one question, something which you later line in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence.
How's it gone so far since?
So the necessity for the arrest is obviously to protect the vulnerable and for prompt and effective investigation. So obviously you are under caution. You will be given obviously your chance to say everything.
A lot of people felt frustrated watching her arrest video. She's just standing there kind of like still with her arms folded across her chest. And to a lot of people, it just seems like she's standing there unfazed by what the officer is stating. She even asked the officers if they're serious, like if they're seriously going to arrest her. It's like, girl, what? Like, you know what you did is wrong. So she was released on bail under one condition: no unsupervised contact with anyone under 18. After being suspended from the school, it is reported that she was still receiving her salary for a bit and that she started working at her parents' cafe in the meantime. Yet, despite everything, the charges, the public scrutiny, and the legal restrictions, Rebecca would break the rules of her bail and do this to another underage boy again. Yes, she engaged in another inappropriate conversation, but this time with boy number two, the one who helped her factory reset her phone to hide all the evidence of boy number one's grooming and assault. Boy number two ended up messaging her at the end of 2021, and Rebecca engaged back, even though again she was told not to do this, and even though again she was on bail for doing this to another boy. She was suspended from her job. Everyone in the community knew about what happened, so instead of learning her lesson and just keeping to herself, she decided to continue this conversation with this other boy. Through Snapchat, boy number two asked Rebecca for pictures, alluding to, inappropriate ones, to which she sent a photo of her in her underwear. According to him, after exchanging more flirty messages, they planned to meet in person. Now, let's just take a pause for a second. She just got arrested and suspended for engaging inappropriately and assaulting another student who is also friends with this boy, and she does it again as if nothing. It's just insane, it's disgusting, it's evil. It just shows how Rebecca truly doesn't care. Now, back to the day when they were planning to take this inappropriate behavior in person. The two met in her apartment in January of 2022, and during this interaction, Rebecca sat on his lap and they kissed intensely on two separate occasions. Rebecca allegedly told him that they would have to wait to have sex until his birthday, which was coming up soon. Boy number two was supposed to be turning 16, which is the legal age of sexual consent in England, so that's why she wanted to wait. He agreed, and on February 4th, 2022, some time after boy number two's birthday, they met again, and this time they had sex, which was actually his first time. Now, something very important to make clear is that this is still assault because it involves someone in a position of power, even if the victim is 16. So Rebecca sexually assaulted him that day. Now, boy number two recalls that day perfectly since he had tickets to a soccer game that he was really looking forward to, but he ended up bailing on the soccer game so he could go be with Rebecca instead. Rebecca then went on to assault boy number two at least 5 more times before June 2022, which was when he graduated from school. However, according to court documents, it says, quote, "It may, after boy number two's graduation from school in June 2022, have become technically legal, but it was always in breach of police bail and it persisted through your, Rebecca's, attendances at court in relation to boy number one's allegations, which of course you, Rebecca, continued to deny." In total, this went on for around 18 months. months. During this time, Rebecca became increasingly jealous and controlling over boy number 2. He began thinking to himself that she was weird and that she needed help and needed to start hanging around people her own age. He said that one time she showed up to where he was with his friends, that she showed up crying her eyes out, and that he had to go to her car to, talk her down. Throughout those 18 months, they were having unprotected sex, which again was Rebecca sexually assaulting him. She had told boy number 2 that it was almost impossible for her to get pregnant due to a health issue that she had. And he believed her. I mean, again, he was a virgin before meeting Rebecca, so he didn't know any better and he believed her. However, in March of 2023, he would receive news that would change his life forever. Rebecca was pregnant with his child. She was pregnant while she was still on bail for her arrest involving boy number 1. It's insane. And the way that she told boy number 2 about her pregnancy just shows the delusion that she had. Rebecca planned like a date night with boy number 2, where she had a scratch card that revealed different sexual positions for them to do, and she had like set out rose petals and hidden notes throughout her apartment and things like that for him to find. Like she kind of set up a scavenger hunt for him. During this like scavenger hunt, he came across a baby onesie that said something along the lines of best dad or I love my daddy. And that's how he found out. They were not planning this, of course, and boy number 2 later said that he was in shock and that they both began crying as they were undecided whether to keep the baby or not. A few months later, in June of that same year, their relationship ended, and boy number 2 actually reported Rebecca to the police and confessed everything to his parents. He said, quote, "We were irresponsible. It's my own fault. I also thought, what the F am I going to do? I can't hide a kid. I had hid the relationship for 18 months from my parents." I think the boy just knew, Rebecca's gonna have this baby soon. There's just no way my parents or anybody is not going to find out that that is my child. So, in a way, he felt cornered to finally confess to everything. And of course, he also just felt that Rebecca was going a little bit cuckoo because she was basically stalking him, jealous, controlling, wanting to know where he was. And at this point, he is still a teenager. So I also think in his mind, he started to realize how messed up this entire situation was and how this grown lady was just acting crazy. So with his confession, Rebecca ended up being arrested once again for another sexual assault. However, just before the arrest, she had reset her phone to factory settings once again, and boy number 2 did as well. So a lot of the evidence was gone. She was then charged and spent 5 months in jail, but she received bail on November of 2023. In total, she was charged with 2 counts of sexual activity for boy number 1, 2 counts of sexual activity for boy number 2, and 2 counts of sexual activity while being a person in a position of trust for boy number 2. Rebecca ended up pleading not guilty to all 6 charges. She denied sexually assaulting boy number 1 despite his semen recovered on her bedsheets. And when asked about this, she was like, well, maybe he did this when he was alone when I left that morning. He was alone in my apartment, so maybe he just, did this by himself. As for boy number 2, she argued that it was sexual intercourse and not abuse because she had with him when he was of age and she was no longer working at the school, arguing that no legal offense was committed. But again, even if a student is of age, which in the UK is 16 to give consent, he would have to be 18 years old in order to give consent and having sex with this teacher, regardless of the fact that she no longer worked at the school. So yeah, she was pretty much denying grooming them and sexually assaulting them. Fast forward to January of 2024, Rebecca gave birth to her and boy number 2's baby, which ended up being a baby girl. However, the baby was taken from her within 24 hours of her birth and is now being brought up by her father, boy number 2, with the help of his family. Rebecca does, however, have supervised visits with the baby. Although boy number 2 is taking care of his child and is finally, free from Rebecca in some way, he still became a father at just 17 years old. The damage all of this has caused him and his family is enormous. Like Judge Cornell said, the baby won't ruin boy number 2's life and he can be a great father, but there is no doubt that he would have never chosen to be a father at that age. Everything in his life just completely shifted and his future plans, as he probably had envisioned them, had been altered forever. In May of 2024, Rebecca's trial began. The victim impact statements from boy number 2, the father of her baby, were extremely sad. They really just broke my heart. He admitted to initially being in denial about the abuse and felt conflicted and even guilty for giving evidence against Rebecca, someone he believed he loved, but later came to understand the true extent of the abuse and, the manipulative tactics that she used against him. He said, quote, "I would argue until I was blue in the face protecting her and would not hear a bad word against her. I felt as though I had betrayed someone I loved and had done wrong by giving evidence." He then added, quote, "I was coerced and controlled, manipulated, sexually abused and mentally abused. The months after the abuse happened to me was a very dark time. I felt backed into a corner. Hearing that just broke my heart, how at first he just felt so confused and felt so guilty for giving up Rebecca, but then finally realizing like, no, she's my abuser. I should be giving her up. He also said that his parents tried and tried getting him to speak about it, but he just felt better off dealing with all of these emotions and realizations by himself since he felt like no one would be able to relate to him. He added how he felt that just because he is a male victim of abuse, he feels that his case is seen as a lesser crime, and he struggled to find support groups for males of his age, saying, quote, "There are a lot for young females and children though. I feel like sometimes these crimes go unnoticed due to men bottling things up. I hope there is an increase in these services in the future." He said now he even struggles with the idea of getting into a real relationship, and it's just really sad thinking how if this were a female, people would be so concerned, and just because it is a male victim, it is, in a way getting brushed off. Boy number 2 also said that he thinks Rebecca has no remorse for what she did, and even thinks that her family believes she truly didn't do anything wrong. Now, there are pictures of Rebecca walking into the courtroom with her dad, and her mom would often join them and, watch the trial from the gallery. The family would just sit there in the gallery watching this, and were sitting so close to where her victims' families were sitting. Now, I wasn't able to find any interviews or direct quotes from her family speaking about this or anything about her sister. However, based on the fact that they showed up with her to the trial, it just seems like they were being supportive of her. Again, I haven't seen a direct statement from them saying that they, support her and believe she's innocent or anything like that, but still, they did show up for her almost every single day. Boy number 2 finished his victim impact statement with something that was really, really sad, and again, it breaks my heart hearing this. He said, quote, "Ultimately, I will forever be Rebecca's victim and forever linked to her through our child." He added that he had a different idea of how his life would be when he had his first child, which would have been in a stable environment with someone that he loved, but that he realizes sadly that that won't be the case. Now, as for Rebecca during the trial, she had a pink baby's beanie tucked into her pants, and she was accused of trying to garner sympathy from the jury. The prosecution even asked her if that's why she had that bonnet with her, and she replied saying, "No, definitely not. I sleep with this every night." So that's that. Now, prosecutor Joe Alman asked her, when an adult has an inappropriate relationship with a child of 13, 14, 15, that's the adult's responsibility. Nothing to do with the child being provocative or making the first move or trying to get the adult's number, is it? And then he went on to ask her, "Did you have a powerful sexual attraction to boys aged 15? To which Rebecca replied saying, "No, not at all." She said that she awkwardly laughed when boy number 1 was on her sofa and told her, "I think you know what I want to do," and because she liked the attention. She said, quote, "I thought he wanted something to happen. I explained I had been in a 9-year relationship and really struggled with the breakup, and I'm not that kind of person. As a teacher, I should have never engaged in any form of contact. I caved into the attention that he was giving me. I struggled massively over the COVID period. I was obviously lonely, and I liked the attention at the time." I just truly feel like there is no excuse for that. It doesn't matter if you were lonely. It doesn't matter if you were dealing with a 9-year relationship ending. It doesn't matter if you were, isolated because of the pandemic. I just don't believe that all of that makes it okay. Makes it okay that she abused 2 of her students. Now, in the court documents, the judge said that although this scenario of them in her apartment might have been a, quote, "good one" in boy number 1's imagination, he later clearly admitted to it being uncomfortable, which just further proves that a minor is not in a position to give proper and legal consent, especially in those situations. What boy number 1 needed was for an adult to say no and to enforce the boundaries. Also, in the court documents, Judge Cornell wrote, quote, "As you were walking upstairs, he was in essence waiting for you to call it off. He couldn't believe that you weren't doing that. He was pushing the boundaries, as young boys do, and he expected and needed you to push back." In regards to boy number 2, she said that she replied to his messages because she was, quote, "curious and genuinely believed that he cared." Again, that does not make sense. Now, the jury was shown videos from boy number 2, where he revealed his first time having was with Rebecca, who told him afterwards that he had been, quote, "great." He said he was obviously very nervous given that this was his first time, but after that, he and Rebecca had around 30 more times before her arrest. 30 more times. That's just insane. The jury also was read a note that Rebecca wrote to boy number 2, which said things along the lines of, quote, "every inch of you is perfect. You are all I ever dream about." Like, girl, you're writing this to a teenager. Now, when asked about this in court, Rebecca said that that note was after boy number 2 graduated. And, well, she basically said that she was in love with him, which is why she wrote him that note. She said, quote, "We were in a relationship. You write letters and cards to people that you are in a relationship with," which again is just crazy to say. The prosecutor noted how even kissing boy number 2, which Rebecca claimed wasn't a big deal since she didn't have sex, was still sexual. He said, quote, "Kissing and sex is part of the whole thing, so I wouldn't have done that." He continued saying, quote, "He was a child, you were an adult, he was a pupil, you were a teacher. He lived with his mom and dad. They were not supposed to know about your liaisons with him. Who was controlling who?" Judge Cornell said that on the outside, it may seem like the two boys were not victims of their older female teacher, and that some might think that a 15-year-old boy would want to have with an attractive female teacher and question how that could be a crime, but that it is a crime. And after hearing both boys' testimonies, it was even more clear to everyone that they were victims. They were naive and vulnerable to advances from an older woman, one that was in a position of power. Young boys are just as likely to be preyed upon by female teachers as young girls are by male teachers. It's equally terrible, morally wrong, and illegal. Judge Cornell also stated that Rebecca, feeling isolated and vulnerable, sought out attention and validation from these young boys because they were, quote, less threatening and allowed her to maintain a sense of control. Something she felt she couldn't achieve in a relationship with someone her own age. Both boys showed maturity in their statements during the trial, stating that the situation was wrong, but that at the end of the day, they lacked the ability to fully understand the risks. Boy number 1 described recognizing the situation as just extremely strange and later admitted that he would not do this again. That unfortunately, one time was enough. Judge Cornell continued speaking directly to Rebecca that in boy number 2's case, he now understands that you were a pedophile and even accused you of that during your, quote, relationship. Boy number 2 said, quote, "Now that I think about it, it was emotional abuse. She just basically mentally abused me. Then I sacrificed 18 months for a pedophile." Speaking to Rebecca, he said, "While you seem nice, your actions were not those of a nice person." So based on these statements, these boys realized that what Rebecca did to them was abuse, that they were victims, and that this was not okay whatsoever. It doesn't matter if at first they thought they wanted it. Now they realize that they would never do this again. The judge told Rebecca that the main issue was that she was the adult responsible for caring for and protecting these boys, but she abused her trust for her own enjoyment. The boys recognized that the situation was strange and wrong, and it's just hard to believe that she didn't realize this. She ignored the significant age and maturity differences, failing to maintain proper boundaries and instead even encourage them to cross those lines. This left one of them to become a father at just 17 years old. Judge Cornell also delivered a really powerful sentencing statement addressing both the seriousness of Rebecca's actions and the huge impact of her abuse of trust on these boys. Despite having no prior convictions, the court found her actions to be deliberate, exploitative, and rooted in a desire for emotional gratification at the boys' expense and vulnerability. The judge said that Rebecca may not have been necessarily attracted to young boys per se, but rather to the power dynamic. It let her enjoy the admiration without the complexity of adult relationships. It felt like these boys were like admiring her and saying that she had like a big butt and things like that. It just fueled her ego. She enjoyed being in control, using her position, experience, and independence to manipulate them. The judge said, quote, "You liked that they found you attractive and that they looked up to you. You felt buoyed and boosted by their attentions, and the attention was without the usual strings or expectations that an adult relationship would have required of you. You were always in control and able to call the shot. You were the one with the car, the flat, the job, the money, the life experience." Although 2 character references spoke well of her during the trial, it didn't help her case. After a 9-day trial, the jury found Rebecca guilty on all 6 charges related to both boy number 1 and boy number 2. She was sentenced to 6.5 years in prison, 4 years for sexual activity with boy number 1, 12 months for kissing and the sexual activity with boy number 2, and 2.5 years for sexual activity involving breach of trust with boy number 2. As a result, she was also added to the sex offender registry and is now subject to a sexual harm prevention order for 10 years. Now, an SPHO is a legal measure meant to protect the public sexual harm by placing strict restrictions on Rebecca's activities, such as limiting her contact with minors, restricting her access to certain locations like schools or parks, and potentially monitoring her internet usage. In addition to the SHPO, she was also issued a restraining order against both boys. Now, she also said something during the trial that was almost an empty sentence, saying that teaching was her dream job, which was ruined by all of this. Like, that should be the least of her worries. And how is she saying that this was ruined by all of this when she's the one who did this? Like, no one forced her to engage with these boys. No one forced her to assault them. No one forced anything. So the fact that she was there saying like, ugh, like teaching was my dream job and now it's all ruined because of this. It's like, you mean because of you, right? I just truly hope that both boys get the support that they need to heal from this and that boy number 2 can continue to be there for their baby who is innocent in this and that he can heal his wounds. I sincerely hope for nothing more than a happy future for them and that they can eventually trust and be in a loving and normal relationship. This case is one of many where manipulation and abuse can happen even in environments that are supposed to be safe. It's a reminder that power imbalances are real and that minors cannot consent, no matter how a situation is framed. If you or someone you know is a victim of grooming, abuse, or sexual violence, or if you're a parent looking to better protect and educate your kids about these issues, I've linked some resources down below to help you start those very important conversations. This case was extremely frustrating. You know, Rebecca's inability to, in a way, take accountability and feel remorse and feel upset about what she did to these 2 boys' lives and how she's destroyed so much. That is the most frustrating part to me. You know, the fact that she's like, well, it technically like wasn't, you know, something because all we did was kiss the first time. It's like, girl, you still should not be kissing your student or kissing a minor. It does not matter. So she is just extremely frustrating. I mean, I wonder what's going to happen when she's let out in a couple of years. Hopefully, you know, her time behind bars just give her time to reflect and truly feel remorse and truly want to be better and be different in the future. As I mentioned, I don't know how her family feels about this or how her sister feels about this, but it's just really shocking how she just affected so many lives by her actions and how she just blames it all on feeling lonely. That's just a ridiculous excuse, but I would love to know what you guys think about this down below. If you guys haven't watched my last video, I covered the case of Ana Luisa de Oliveira, who received an anonymous birthday cake that would leave her fighting for her life after taking a bite of it. The person who was responsible was someone no one could have guessed, and it's heartbreaking to think how someone you thought you could trust could so easily betray you. You can click on the screen at the end of the video to watch, along with another past video. Also, thank you to the Familia members who are watching this video early before it goes live. By joining Familia members, you get to watch all my videos first, get bonus videos every month, plus a portion of every membership supports the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Lastly, thank you to everyone who signed up for my new newsletter, True Crime Jackie News. The second issue goes out on October 6th, so there is still time to sign up. It's completely free. It's your new resource for true crime updates, missing persons info, expert insights, a Familia Q&A section where I answer your questions at the end, and more. You can sign up with the link in the description box down below. One more thing, I also have a second channel where I discuss thriller and mystery movies, so if you guys want to see that, I will also have that link down below. Once again, thank you guys so much for being here and for helping me spread awareness on these very important topics. Let me know what you guys thought about this video down below, and I will see you guys in my next one. Bye, familia.